Gotcha.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. Yes, I'm the first gen college student who came down out of the hills to interrupt your perfectly good lunch today.
It's by the keyboard. Yes.
This is the one?
Yes.
Okay. So when we first started talking about this, and Josie gave in my introduction, the kind of the genesis of my talk today. And what I'm talking about is a little overly specific towards what our students encounter with Capstone project, but it actually is broadly applied to a lot of what we do at Oregon Tech. I was involved in 2012 with moving our campus, consolidating 4 campuses and moving our campuses to this site here in Wilsonville. They were now calling it Portland Metro. And it was a ludicrously ambitious enterprise because consolidating things and moving them and then reapplying them and getting them working again in what really was only about a month was a lot to ask. So it isn't just me that did this. I was working in a team of people that were working on this. I had some employees and so forth, and I was coordinating what we prioritized, what we put into laboratories to get them up and functional, and was directly reporting to our senior administrator at the time. So I didn't have a whole lot of bureaucratic friction to get things moving, and I could go to my supervisor and really get a lot moving because of that. But as a consequence of our move here, one of the main things I was noticing with our student body was that I was having to disassemble and sometimes dispose of students' capstone work that was left on campus. And it broke my heart because they had put a lot of work into this. And as a student myself, I had started taking capstone classes. And so I was already kind of in the pipeline to be doing this myself. And it occurred to me that what was really missing in the puzzle of student and university interaction was someone that liaisoned with the university, or someone that provided some type of support system between students, faculty, and staff. And that is what my job has evolved into. Lab technicians at other universities do not do the type of work that I do here. It's kind of a misnomer that that's what my job title is. So I came up with this term, engineering education consultant. That's not what's going to be on my pay stub. It's just what I do. So yeah, on the pamphlet, there's a picture of me in desert camo. I served in Iraq in the Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. That's hard to say these days. I've gotten so used to saying the 2020 something, and that was now 20 years ago. My niece, who was born that year, is 20 this year, and I have so much less hair. That tour was the last thing that I did in the military. So I served for 8 years. I served for 7 years up to that point, deployed with the National Guard Company, all of which were people I didn't know. We went to Iraq. We did this thing with vertical construction. On a long card, I'll tell you all the boring stories about it, but there's too much to talk about here. But one of the themes that developed through my military career was that everywhere I went, and anything that I tried to do as a job, and I had 3 separate careers: combat arms, aviation, and finally vertical construction, were fraught with these tasks that seemed to require extensive knowledge of what you were doing. So they were high-skilled tasks. They needed to be repeatable, and no one had ever heard of how you do that in industry. No one ever, this was the 1990s, everybody. There was grunge rock, and we didn't know what lead manufacturing was. And so I constantly found myself coming up with techniques or strategies to fix problems in the way that we did our job, whether it was disassembling a howitzer, whether it was emplacing, whether it was building something or preparing something that went into an aircraft. There were all these problems that I was encountering. And that is essentially what somehow prepared me to do this job. All right, so our students' capstone work is a demonstration of their cumulative educational enterprise at this point. And ideally, it would give them a chance to practice all these different skills that they've learned. That would be in the form of, modeling a situation or assembling the parts for a project, or whatever it is. They ideally would have a set of skills that would make this possible for them to complete, and then this would test that ability. And ideally, they would finish with a portfolio. They would have something to show for their efforts in college that was related to the career that they were choosing. The first thing I have to get over with people when I counsel on Capstone is that you're not turning in a gadget or a widget with a blinky light or anything on it for your grade. You're turning in a report. That's what's graded. The thing that actually matters is printed on paper and submitted to your advisor, not the thing with a nest of wires and things that will shock you. So that is really hard to overcome, because what I find, as myself being a first-generation college student, is that the way that our brain approaches a thing like a project like this is, well, of course I demonstrate my value through my ability to make a thing. That's self-evident. And it turns out that that's not the case with Capstone. So this is a difficult strategy to begin to socialize people to. The other part of this that took a surprising amount of time for me to learn, given that I was in the service and was ostensibly part of teams all the time, was learning that there were things that I could do well, and there were things that other people did well. And when the cards are down and when you have something to deliver, you do the thing that you do well, and then you delegate everything else to people that are capable of those things. And this is the reason why Capstone Project is such a team-oriented activity, because what we're supposed to do is collect ourselves into a small group of Swiss Army nerds and then build the thing that each of us are individually good at, and then submit that for grade, obviously. And I just said build the thing and submit it for grade. What I meant by that was and what I continue to encounter is that I'll be talking about how to go about do this, and then I'll run into, so one of the first things that kind of trips us up is the tools of how we get that accomplished. And oftentimes that's as simple as, no one's ever actually learned how to use Microsoft Word. It actually is a software tool with a list of features as long as your leg, and no one's ever heard of them. I've only encountered one student group I've ever worked with in the 12 years I've been here who said, oh yeah, we know all about that stuff. They just happen to be the group of people that took the one class, the one time that showed them how to do this. And so oftentimes I'll stop down with folks and start talking about, okay, well, this is how you actually design a report in Microsoft. This is how you actually structure it. And then the other part of the sort of the mission that we have, this sense of, what do we talk about in the series, is this idea that, well, if Microsoft Word is one of the first kind of indicators that person that might be underskilled for the Capstone project, what else don't we know? What else has not been properly transmitted to the student body? And what it turns out is that as staff members, we become experts in the job that we have here. That should be self-evident. That would be ideally what we would be doing. And the things that we use every single day to do our job, whether they be open and above board systems or the sneaky shadow systems that make our job really function. There we go. What we don't realize is that a lot of times people don't even really, that's so common to us that we don't realize that anyone else who might have been with the university for a couple of years taking classes has never heard of half the stuff that we use. And so I find it incumbent upon myself and my colleagues to work together as a network of professionals that don't hammer people over the head with this information, but know when to strategically bring it to your attention. When we know how to strategically place it in front of you in a way that's useful, and it's not just a stack of books like the ones that were given to me that told me about how the VA worked when I left the Army, which I never looked at because, back then I didn't think you had anything useful in a book. You wouldn't hide it from me, you put it there. That's changed since I've been in college. All right, so what we run into is this problem of scope creep. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We have this nice project that's going to have this finished result, and it's going to be great. We're going to take it to conferences and present it to our other professional friends. And the next thing we know, what we're doing is adding features to it so that it'll never be finished. And this is the inherent quality of all projects. No project that any human being has ever started ended with the feature set that they thought would be worthwhile to work on at the beginning. Because you always run into problems with either the design, the availability of parts or hardware, or components that are necessary, or some other thing that you have to improvise as you go along, and all that does is create ripples over time. And so a central concept in what I bring to a capstone project consultation is how to constrain scope. So it turns out that starts with that pesky program for Microsoft called Microsoft Word. Because ideally what we do, knowing full well that that is the thing that's going to be turned in for grade, that's what we prioritize, that's what the check mark is on our transcript, is we start our report at the beginning. And everybody knows that reports, because we've written so many of them by the time we get to our senior year, they all have sections like introduction and methods and analysis and conclusion and so forth. But the one thing that we often never include in those term reports is that section where we talk about, this is the stuff we didn't do. But if we did have more time, more money, and possibly the use of magic, we would have put these features into our project. And so the first thing I get into is, let's accept the reality that our project is going to have scope creep. And if it does, let's make a container to put it into. If you build a null device into the operations of creating and working on a project, then you have a logical place to put all your most brilliant ideas that you could never possibly do in 9 months. And that is those sections. I give them a couple of different names. Future features and development is a nice way to put it if you're doing a project that like a device. Sometimes it's future research and work. But this is the key to scope containment. And you never see this in those guides and instructions online or those quick, how do you do a project and project management? No one ever talks about this. This is the thing that I think is central to how our students can be successful.
That's great.
That's so.
I mean, I think, a lot of stuff has that, but I think it's pretty unique to think of it, creating it at the beginning and storing things there. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. 100% of anyone I've ever worked with has basically a 10-year plan.
Yep.
Next project.
Right.
Outlining it first that's really interesting.
And the beauty of having a container to put your best ideas in
Yeah.
is if you show up at the end of the year and your advisor goes, come on, you want to turn this in for grade? And you can say, oh, wait, there's more. And then you drag out one of these brilliant ideas or features that you put into the container so that it didn't overburden your project. And now you can negotiate the terms on this as, all right, well, you wanted more features or design aspects, here we are.
Yeah.
I saved it for myself. One of my favorite projects I've ever worked on is the one that probably will never be finished because it's so fun to work on it. Why ever finish it, right? But it's a legacy project that I came up with that is about creating a safety interlock for machine tools so that it prevents unauthorized users from working on the machine tool. I mean, there's plenty of people that are totally capable of using our CNC mill, for example, but I don't know that. They could walk into the building and say, yeah, I'm a pro, I know everything, and I need to find that out first. And this interlock device is supposed to prevent that from happening until we've done some vetting, right? And as I worked with this group of seniors on this project, every time we met, they said, we have another idea for how to do this. And I said, brilliant, guys. Let's put that into that chapter. Let's write it down, make a note of it there, and stay on course because I want you all to graduate before you are almost 50 like me. All right. So I mentioned earlier that one of the skill set sticking points is just using Microsoft Word. It turns out that Microsoft designed this writing program, and we use 1% of it, like I use it with my brain, just about 1 or 2%. And the thing that's missing from most people's training on how to use this program is a way to set it up so that, well, one, it's impossible to plagiarize, which it turns out is actually really important to us. And two, that I used to, I love listening to the sound of birds chirping in the morning. It's one of my favorite things. I used to work with this program and then hear that because I was up all night fighting the program. And then I would hear robins chirping in the morning. This is no way to go through college. It will give you gray hair. And so what I ultimately learned from this university, because I happen to be one of the lucky people who took the class, was that this program has a global formatting feature, which automates 90% of the things that we fight with it. And this is what I teach to our seniors when they ask for it. You know, I don't try to drag anybody in a headlock and make them learn this. They gotta want it. Microsoft Excel. Oh my God. Obviously, right? Anybody who's done a dissertation or performed a lengthy academic project knows that they're going to use this program. With not very much training, it turns out that this can be an amazing approach. Just this one simple trick, no one wants you to know about, can really leverage the 19 things you're trying to keep together in a capstone project. And I say 19 because I wanted to pick a number that was not even nor divided by 5 and would really catch your attention. So what I usually end up doing is by the end of our first consultation is I've helped the student design their budget, for example. When I was working on Capstone, my budget was every time I got a receipt, I would stick it into a bag somewhere and then forget where the bag was. And this worked great because I never knew how much I actually spent on this project. It was thousands of dollars. This is not a realistic approach. And then the last thing is, I don't know how we do this. Every one of us as faculty and staff know how to drive an Outlook program. We use it every single day. And it's the most obvious thing in the world to us. And we send each other meeting requests and we do all this thing with this program. And our students never learn how to use this program. They're probably going to use it in their final I don't want to say final destination. I want to say in their career, but they're going to end up someplace working where they're going to use this program, and they never learned how to leverage it to most effectively work with us. Critical. Students ask me all the time, when can I get an appointment with you? I said, well, this is about schedule's booked. That's really hard to do. And then I realized, why don't you just look it up in the scheduling assistant? Oh, that's because we never learned how to use scheduling assistant, because there's no class that specifically teaches it. So what do I end up doing when they're seniors? This is how we use Outlook. This is the power side of using Outlook. Unintentional things that we just hide from everybody because it's obvious to us, we use it every day. All right, so a couple of other tools. I was in a lab the other day and I was working with some students and this thing delights me. She goes, well, the first thing I do is I take a picture of something in the lab with my phone. Then I upload it to my Google Drive, and then I use that to download it to my computer. And she listed 19 steps to turn a picture into a PDF. And I said, do you use OneDrive? And they go, kinda. And I said, put it on your phone. Next time you go to, you know what I'm talking about. The next time you want to put go ahead and take a snapshot of the thing you saw laying on a table. Yeah, you can upload it to OneDrive as a PDF. You can take a picture of the whiteboard as a PDF. No one's ever heard of this. This is amazing to me. It's because I use it every day. And it's just one of those little things that we never think like, oh, we should tell people. Yeah, it's true. And so this is like among one of these free things that does an amazing utility for us that I want to really publicize and get out there. This last one on the page, I'm not going to talk a lot about. I use it every day. I use it every time I talk to a senior. I use it constantly to do my job or to help other people do their jobs. It's 3D modeling software. It took a while for me to learn because it just took a long time for me to learn because I wasn't going to any professional classes to learn it. I had to learn it kind of trial and error. I give workshops in this now. This program's incredible. If you have an idea for something you want to do for a project, you just design this program. Sounds easy. Then when you're ready, if there's a part of it that you want to make on a 3D printer, bam, you've got a part you can print out and try it out. Are you a skilled machinist? If it turns out that's true, bam, there you go, right over to the CNC mill. One of the most useful things to a person's capstone project is just images. Images of the thing that you're working on that's proposed. You haven't built it yet. It's going to take a lot of time and money to do that. Bam, you got pictures. You create drawings in this program. It's amazing. Who knows about it? It's free. It's free. We all use it for free. I think the actual user license is $1,500 a year.
It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, totally. And we paid nothing for it for as long as you want. Well, until you graduate, you guys. Me, this guy, forever. So I'll never graduate. All right, and so one of the things that baffles me, again, I use the library all the time. That's where I hide some of my tools and equipment. You know what I'm talking about.
In a book, you gotta like haul it out.
Yeah, totally. Hide it in the library inside of all of that book. No, literally in glass-faced storage cabinets where you can look at them and see what is very likely something approaching like, I don't know, $100,000 worth of lab equipment. It's ludicrous what's stored in the library. Now, there's specialized instruments for testing electronics in most cases, but nonetheless, during the unpleasantness, which is what I refer to as the things that happened in 2020, when it became obvious that we were going to have to work on a new paradigm for how to teach and deliver hands-on learning, I put this stuff in the library and made it available for our students to check out with a non-contact checkout policy. Another one of the projects I worked on, which I'm very proud of. It is unusual. I've heard people tell me, because I don't go to other universities, I come here every day. Why would I go someplace else? To find that universities have this range of the type of things that students use in their classes in the library. And that's not all. It turns out there's more. So a modern consideration for our students in their as they're pursuing their projects is to acknowledge and report on how standards and regulatory agencies would look at their work. This is key because it turns out that is also what our students will be doing in their careers. Regulatory standards make their way into every single thing you touch and turn into a product or a service that is delivered to a client. It has to. And so in our library, there is a lengthy list of databases that our librarians can help with that tell you what those standards are, or are if they're not some sort of clearinghouse for these standards, they're at least the actual standards. And for electrical engineers who've never heard of the National Electric Code, that's where you begin, turns out. And I've encountered students I've worked with who did not know that the library provided these standards. They thought that they had to buy them. Go ahead and look up what it costs to buy the Underwriter's Laboratory manual. It's pretty spendy. I know what you guys do in that. The library is incredible. And ours is even more incredible than most because of these reasons. All right. We're getting, mercifully, we're getting to the end. I know what you're thinking. All right, so a couple of pictures on this slide, and I'll quickly go over them. And the first one is the Eisenhower matrix. I learned about this because I listened to one of those productivity podcasts, and they were talking about this, and I thought, oh, I gotta look that up and see what that is. Holy smokes, that's incredible. So earlier I talked about the ideal way to approach a project is to do the things that you're good at and delegate everything else that you can. Well, the Eisenhower matrix is one of those ways to approach that. It's one of the decision tools that we can use to employ here. And the reason I bring this up is not because it's the best or the finest or the first or the only one. It's because the concept of looking for an organization tool is foreign to most of us, not least of which this guy, who still thinks that you want to hide something, you put it in a book. So I bring this type of project organization strategy to this presentation because it's important to me to talk about how you oftentimes try to reinvent the wheel and you don't have to. There's already been a wheel made. You can make the other part of the thing that requires wheels and not that. And this Eisenhower matrix is one example of how you go, okay, is it urgent or important? Let's get it done right now. I know that I can handle this. If it falls into either of the other three quadrants, it might be a thing that you can hand off to someone else. This is coming from a guy who tries to do everything himself and fails constantly at it. The next bit I want to bring up, I learned about this from one of my supervisors a long time ago, and we talk about how to organize my work because I was just running around with my head on fire. And so it turns out that the Kellogg logic model gives us one of these. It's one of the types of thing called the logic model. It's not the only one. This is just one that I like to use because it's nice and general. But what it does is it gives you a formatting for abstract concepts that are part of projects and concrete concepts that are part of projects. So what I like to do is just dwell right here in the activities, and that goes on for a decade. And this is really costly because of it, and that I never do anything over here, but these are more abstract. So activities and inputs are concrete. They represent hours and time and effort and labor and coordinating things and getting together with your group and arguing over stuff. And of course, the inputs are, maybe they're self-evident to everyone, but yeah, that's the bits and bobs and pieces of things that you end up wasting if you're doing a lot of activities and not a lot of abstract planning. So what I talk about is not the exact thing that we want to produce at the end of the capstone. I mean, we know that that's a report, but the report could be about almost anything. So let's talk about the impact of what that work will be. That's a way out there idea, and it's lost on most of us because it's such an abstraction of the work. So you might ask, what is my impact? All right, so I characterize everything that I do at this university with this abstract idea of a noble cause to increasing people's knowledge about how to do these types of things, how to self-actualize, how to enter into a new career and be highly effective. That's my noble cause. That's my impact. So I wake up every morning and come in here and goof off for 7 hours, do 1 hour of work, and that's how I do this. The outcomes of their work are going to be a little more concrete. They're kind of obvious. Like one of them is that our seniors are going to graduate. That'd be a nice outcome of their efforts. Another outcome is that they maybe, get a job making a pretty good living. Buy that boat that they've always wanted. I don't know, but it's an outcome. Outcome is graduation, for example, commencement. And the outputs are much more concrete, but they're still an abstract idea because those outputs could be a subsystem to a project. It could be delivering the final report. It could be that somebody in the group finished off that poster that we're going to have on symposium day and we're able to present it. But this characterizes two different ends of a spectrum of a project, which are super abstract ideas, which we can always keep in our mind and make determinations about what we focus on. Because an impact that says, oh, well, the thing that we turn in could be almost anything, but it is turned in. And the consequence of that is this impact. Then it means that we can make easier decisions on what we throw out, what we put in that chapter for future features and development, and what we focus on in the activities. It reduces our activities and it reduces our inputs. That's the main concept of a logical analysis. Okay, mercifully. I found this interview with someone who wrote a book called Proof, and it's a kind of a documentary on how alcohol is made and distilled. Not that I touch it at all. Anyway, so the author said, well, I was interviewing somebody for the book, and he says that my interview subject tells me this little quote, and I really liked it. And so I've forgotten who said it, I've forgotten who quoted it, and I've forgotten everything about it, except I really love this idea. And the guy says, well, if you're not writing things down, you're just doing arts and crafts. You're not doing science. Science requires that you, record your data, that you perform analysis, that you can reflect on what happened and make it repeatable. If you're not doing that, you might as well be gluing macaroni to a paper plate and watercoloring it, because that's not science. And so, this is one that's a little more well known because it was articulated on Mythbusters by Adam Savage, who I'm a big fan of. He has incredible ideas about all of these things I've talked about, and it's this, you're just screwing around. You got to write stuff down. All right, that's my final slide, everybody, and mercifully we're over with. Do we have time for questions? If anybody has them, anybody have any questions on me?
I just want to know if you've read Adam's book.
I have.
Every Tool is a Hammer.
You got it. Yeah. What's
So-
the name?
Every Tool is a Hammer.
Everybody-
That's a,
Yeah.
and if you listen to the audiobook, Adam reads it.
Yeah.
It's
It's true.
That's always nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
Thank you for asking. Great question. By the way, oftentimes wherever I'm standing, it's book club time with Richard, because I'm always doing something with my hands, so I never have time to actually read anything.
Yes.
So I put it into my brain through the holes in my head, which works really well, and then I can claim that I'm reading.
Exactly.
You have a question?
I've got a question. So how do you approach W/R/T? with the utilizing the power of Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Outlook. When I say those three pairs of words, you know, we all cringed, right?
Yeah.
However, you touched on, like, we've got, you know, for this single digit percentage that we've got mastered, it's just scratching the surface of the functionality.
Yeah.
You know, these programs have been around solving every problem for decades. When I come across someone who, if you would just open the OneDrive app or your camera or what have you to scan a PDF, it's mind blowing to me. They don't want to hear it. Or you can do X, Y, and Z in Outlook, and they Outlook and you shut down,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's hard.
I'm so glad you asked that question, Phil. We got another 3 hours. No, I'll answer your question pretty succinctly. It turns out that oftentimes with a lot of this stuff I'm talking about, it's called a path to completion. And when I go, oh, there's all these tools, and let's just talk about those tools, everybody's gonna be like, I don't have time for this. I got to go home and feed my cat. And there has to be kind of two things that fit together, and this is on a much larger conceptual worldview that I have, which is, how do you transfer this idea called you get it? Because the thing that helped me get it was I woke up one morning and realized I didn't know how things worked, and I panicked. And that translated into a lifetime of like this, and I think the phrase is in this pamphlet, this existential need to know how things work. It drives me up a tree if I don't know how something works. And so it's easy for me to say, oh, we'll just open the program and use it. Wrong. It turns out a path to completion is always connected to a person's emotional state, their emotional needs. So until a need is met, they're going to try, as Winston Churchill once said, everything possible before they do the right thing. Right? This is what Americans are good at, according to Winston Churchill. We'll try everything possible, and then we'll finally do the right thing. So what is the need? If a person actually needs something, they'll know it. And the strategy, of course, is knowing how to, and this is hard to transfer, I wish I could. The primary thing I'm trying to do here is to transfer knowledge, is to know the timing on that. Because this is a terminology that I use when I talk about some of the unbelievable failures in my life, which is, I call this the white knight syndrome. I put on my gleaming armor and my veil, get the lance, jump on that horse, ride in, and everybody clear out. I'm here to save the day. That does nothing for anyone. That is, well, first of all, it's divisive. And secondly, all you've done is be the hero, and no one else can do the thing that you wrote in and saved the day doing.
And now you're exhausted.
Yeah, now you look like me.
You did that.
So yeah, there's this real difficult transition I've been making through middle age, which is to not show up and save the day, but to walk in and ask questions. So what do you need? This is a wild idea that's kind of new to me, but it's the XY problem. People will often come in and say, I have problem X. I really need to work on problem X. But until you interview them, the long answer to your question, with the 5 whys, the 7 whys, well, why? Why do you need to do that? Why is it necessary? It's hard to encapsulate what we're actually trying to accomplish because X is presented as the problem. You know, the mirror in my car is broken. Well, why? The car's laying on it. Well, yeah. Now we have a new interesting challenge. It's not repairing the mirror, it turns out. Just, right? This is a classic German joke. Anyway, so I hope that kind of gets to your question, which is, okay, so sometimes, yeah, you'll go, well, are you kidding? Just
Right.
put it on your phone. Use your phone, dum-dum. Well, no,
Yeah,
it's,
because we've all taken the time and figured out,
Yeah.
and now it's a unconscious button click, but that's also quite a.
I think that's a really interesting point though, Bill, because like until we know that it's gonna benefit us.
Yeah.
Right, you know, like, and
Yeah.
that is what we're all trying to.
Well, the
convey.
benefit is exactly what
You
you
know?
touched on,
Yeah, that's
like
really interesting.
the curiosity, stay curious,
Yeah.
my friend,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
How does stuff work?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's addicting most people it's not. It's just, I just want thing. I don't want to do thing or learn thing.
Or I don't wanna change
So I'll
my,
do everything
yeah,
else.
I change my thing,
Right.
because it's the only thing I know, like the rooted.
Or adding to it
Yeah.
or relearning it, yeah.
I-
So, yeah,
that's what
it's a
you're talking about.
loaded question, thank you.
One of the most ingenious things I've ever heard anybody come up with, and it wasn't me that came up with this. This is one of our former faculty who used to teach power and economics. She would say, people don't care about transmission or grids or energy prices. They care about hot showers and cold beer. If you can deliver that, and do so in a way that's not very disruptive to people, they're gonna be fine. They're gonna be happy to engage in that arbitrage where they exchange dollars US for hot showers and cold beer. And this comes up all the time in how we work with our students because, of course, what do we have? Wow, this huge Library of Alexandria right here between my ears. I could just tell you all these things. It'd make your life so much easier. No way is that gonna fit. You can't get a wedge in. But if someone's curious, they'll start asking for more things. And wow, that is a spark, right? I can't transfer that to you guys. I can talk about it, but it's really something that you have to cultivate yourself. I was a high school sophomore, and I grew up in this like rural community, but I didn't have I will not get into my family system. That's a competition for the car. I had these people that were unbelievably talented, but terrible at transferring information. So I made it to sophomore in high school. I was basically failing and was not going to be very much, not going to do very much, not going to become very much. And by accident, because I took shop class, but the teacher changed the idea of shop class that year. And we had this high performance workplace. And so we were doing a project and there were students that were building a ground effects vehicle. And
A what?
Ground effects vehicle.
What is that?
Well, it's a hovercraft.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Imagine this guy knowing the terminology ground effects vehicle. So if you ever go to Virginia, visit Fort Eustis. They have the craziest hovercraft the Army tried in the 1960s. And so my buddies, they were just sort of goofball, slacker, I don't want to call them idiots, but they were goofball slackers. We're working on the power plant. And I couldn't believe it. These guys, who I really didn't give them any credit at all for being capable of doing anything, were bending wrenches on this lawnmower engine. And I was a little scalded by this because I didn't really think of myself as being that much smarter than they were, but I definitely couldn't believe that they were capable of doing this. And I was on the team that trained the pilot how to fly this thing, which meant that we just goofed off all the time. And so that turned into this thing that I have. It turned into this thing that motivates me to know how things work. I want to know what's going on because I'll be damned if those goofball hicks are gonna know how to fix a motor and I can't. Sorry about the language. I love those guys. They're doing fine in life. They're turned out to be mechanics. Shocker. Yeah. Long answers to your questions. I'm sorry. Any other questions?
What's WRT?
yeah, that was what I was saying.
Sorry.
With regards.
Good regard to.
Got it.
And Phil and I watched the same Stephen Covey presentation, I think. And so, yeah, our ladder is not up against the wrong wall, and we refer to with regard to as W/R/T. Little short.
Yeah. Like, that's something that people can use, or why did you say you
It's-
cringe, or did you say, what did you say about it?
With regard to?
Yeah, you said W/R/T.
Oh,
and then
I was just apropos of the topic earlier,
Yeah.
with regard to the topic of utilizing Word and Excel.
Okay, so
Yes.
there's.
And then,
that.
right, because I used the weird acronym to move through your concentration. Awesome.
Glad you came to school today.
That's what they say about assuming things, right?
This has been an absolute
Is
delight.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is there, trying to think, sorry, have it in my head, but how to say it.
Start with W or.
What would you want students to know. I guess I want to say the single thing, but it's, or.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the most or helpful thing for students to know or understand or, something like that?
What are
That
the
no
I-
one knows.
Yeah, thank you for finishing, that's, yeah.
Who knew? This guy was bogarting all the answers to these questions. I have, like I said earlier, I have this bizarre career here where I don't do as much lab tech stuff as much as I do a lot of other things that really expands the scope of my job. So when people ask me what I do, I go, it's kind of a narrative, actually.
How much time?
So I end up talking to employers more frequently than I have any business to. And I will ask them, what is it that you want to see from your new hires, given that they've probably just left college? And they'll say, well, we want them to have the ability to learn and learn fast. And we want them to have the ability to translate what they know into actions. And that is a ludicrous answer to your question, because that is super abstract from what we're doing here day to day in the classroom.
Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do at university, is learn how to learn? I mean, you're doing,
Precisely. Yes, of course. That's what yes, ideally we're here to learn.
how do you build that into
How to
a
learn.
lesson plan?
Yeah, totally. And so what is the subject that we use? Well, we'll use a topic. So we're teaching physics, so our topic is projectile motion. And what you're teaching is what we figured out in the 18th century, how projectiles fly. That's great. Napoleon was highly successful because he knew these things. Artillery guy. Napoleon. But literally, what that term is delivering for the student's future and with their employer is how to learn what they're having to do for their job, what their job entails. And then the ideal result at the end of the term, when they take their final, and I'm terrible at finals, by the way, is not to regurgitate that, but to have synthesized what we talked about during the term and make it actionable. That would be the ideal outcome. And that is often lost on us because the term can feel so hard and so high pressure, and there's so many things going on. And I had to take my dog to that, and then there was this other thing, my car broke down, and this happened, and so forth and so on. There's a lot of externalities, a lot of distractions. Oh, and by the way, we're also trying to learn. And the whole time we're doing this, our brains are in a state of elevated state of survival, as opposed to this deep and enriching state of learning and growing new brain tissue. And I don't think I'm going to stand here and tell anybody how to do their job in the classroom any better, but that's literally what that interplay, what's going on is this conflict between the stress that a student is experiencing during the term and these abstract ideas that they're not going to do projectile motion at their job. What they're going to do is learn how this computer system works that then puts out this data point that then does a thing so we can manufacture this thing. And that's really hard to get to. So I gave you an answer which is all nearly useless.
Really?
No, so actually I have
Well,
a
how often do we just sit and
kind of-
talk about the mechanics?
follow-up. So I would agree with you. So something I've been, I guess, in an ideal world, I would love to, or let's say, let me back up a second. So I think a lot of what you're talking about, like the type of, is something that's motivating a lot of changes in how people teach.
Yeah.
But of course, like there's a huge amount of inertia and tradition to overcome, because there's this, we've always done it this way.
I was thinking the same thing.
And so like, over the last few years, I've been thinking more and more about, or I should say, I give a final because I feel like that's what you're supposed to do in your class. And I've become more and more disillusioned with it, like thinking about, like, I don't think it's really an accurate, in a lot of cases of what a student has learned or what problems they could solve and stuff like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in some, for some people, it can be, they're good at test taking. And for others, they might know it, but the anxiety of being there and having a large percentage of your grade rely on it. And then you end up changing it anyway, because you're like, oh, this doesn't reflect the student. So I don't want it to tank their grade. So I'm gonna curve it or rescale it so that it doesn't have that effect.
Yeah.
And so, so for me, someone who is not, is a theorist and doesn't know any of these, use machines and stuff like that. But like, I've always had this in the back of my head think, it would be really cool, but I'm scared of it, is to have like instead of a final, have a project or something, like have students do a project, because I feel like that would be better. And maybe, and like you said, I feel like it would be more worthwhile. The students would get more out of it. It would actually accomplish more probably of what goals I want them to have.
Yeah.
But it's actually really scary, like for me, because I'm used to doing a final and I know how to do that and everything. And so I guess this long way to come to the question is, could I like talk to you?
Yeah.
And could we like think about maybe possibly how to like do that in a introductory physics class?
Yes, and I'll give you two ideas. One, you do have to design it around a digital number that you get at the end for their grades, because we're still conforming to that system.
Yes, right.
And two, that's like that path to get there, of course, is you design a rubric.
Yeah,
And then the next part of it is that, not that I want to give you too many ideas, all I'm qualified to do is fix helicopters and shoot guns. Remember, that's my entire training here. And the other part is that they score each other. They learn the behavior and process of evaluation, which is profoundly more useful in their careers later on, because they'll be thinking about how to sort and organize the information that they're evaluating. So you've taught them the discrete calculation that you perform to understand entropy in ideal gas law. That's brilliant. If they have a project that they have a known rubric to perform to, and then surprise, on the day of, it's actually their peers who are judging their conformity to that rubric, you have just strapped a projectile onto them. I had to take it. Yeah, you've given them some leverage that brings them into the workplace with a skill set that employers don't know how to ask for. They don't know, they know what they want. They want the productivity of their employees to have this bottom line consequence, but they're not really sure what they're asking for. They have an XY problem just like the rest of us do. So
unless it's like an applicable, they're taking the knowledge, they're grinding through it and applying it rather than answering questions.
yeah, totally.
Which I understand, like the finals probably trying to do the same thing, but.
When you try to, it's hard to,
But
it's hard to squeeze all that into,
Yeah, you have 11
hours and.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have 11 weeks, and people's attention really ends at about 50 minutes. And so how do you get this body of knowledge that constitutes our definition of a physics education, for example, into everyone's minds that they'll be accountable for later when they're taking circuits, or when they're taking I don't know, one of the statics or whatever, right? They're going to be accountable for that information later. So the most noble question, and maybe the most noble answer to that question, is, well, how do we get this all done in 11 weeks? And it be meaningful in a way that they retain. Yeah. Hard question. Let's talk about it. These are good questions. Thanks
If
for
you set
asking.
it up right, you never have to work at it again.
You just show up.
You do all the work.
Right? Wear your service pin. We inspire it, and then you go, all right, everybody go.
Work yourself.
Thanks for
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate your time and everything you did to prepare for today and what you're bringing to our community every day. Once again, please enjoy pie, and one of them is Richard's faves. Debbie and crew, CIC team, shout out for helping us out today. Happy Wednesday. Lots of leftovers. Take care of yourselves, please.
Can we take leftovers?
Yes.
If we're not a student.
Always.
Yeah. So my husband is teaching that class this term. And I think you guys have some really good kind of meshing, I think, about like this kind of stuff. So like he worked with government, and